Good morning, everybody. Hope this finds you well and that you had a lovely weekend. We finally had a glorious weekend, so I hope you were able to enjoy that. So today we are looking at how do we keep our teaching fresh, finding a bit of inspiration for our classes. So I'm aware for myself, as someone who's been teaching a long time, and it's something that I see pop up sometimes in Facebook groups as well, that people are perhaps looking for some inspiration for their lessons. And if you're an experienced teacher, it may be that sometimes you feel like you're perhaps kind of stuck in a bit of a rut, kind of repeating a lot of the same stuff, or you're trying to find something that's a bit fresh or new or keeping things interesting. Or it may be, and it's a very normal thing, that just sometimes we kind of fall out of love with our job a little bit and just feel a little bit flat and not feeling that enthusiasm of a newly qualified teacher. So it's a normal cycle to go in. So we're going to have a look at some ways to help with that. But equally, if you're relatively new to teaching, you might not have all the experience and a back catalogue of lesson plans to draw on for those times where you're a bit stuck of what to do. And so, the typical thing, or certainly something that I did for a long time, was, if I was planning ahead and thinking, oh, what am I going to sort of teach over the next few weeks? It may well be going to my yoga books, looking through some old lesson plans. It might be going through some study notes from courses I've been on. And definitely, that's a really good thing to do. Sometimes you might find a lesson plan you'd forgotten about and you think, oh yeah, I forgot I wrote all this stuff. And so it can be nice to re-find things. But certainly if you are a bit more of an experienced teacher, which I think a lot of people in this group are, there is a danger of staying in that same groove of that repetition. It's that thing of, if we go through the same processes, it's likely that we'll come to the same outcomes or the same conclusions. So we're just going to kind of repeat something, and there is that saying of, don't keep planting potatoes and expecting beans, or whatever they use. It's like, if we keep repeating the same thing but expecting a different outcome, it's not really going to work. So today we're sort of looking at maybe less conventional ways of getting a bit more connection to our practice, a little bit more inspiration for our classes. And as we know, yoga isn't just an exercise class. So it's not just looking at books with different sequences and asana practices and those sorts of things. They can spark an idea for sure, but sometimes we need a deeper level of inspiration. So I think one of the most important things is our own practice. So we can start thinking about our own yoga practice first. And I'm assuming that we all have some sort of home practice. But I find it really useful to go to other teachers' classes. So that can be quite a simple way to get a new experience in yoga. I think it's really nice to be led by someone else. It reminds you what it's like to be a student. Their teaching cues may be really different. They may teach very familiar postures, but maybe the way they build up into it and out of it, or their sequencing, or there's so many variations that we have and so many different focal points and teaching cues. I really think going to other teachers' classes can be really inspirational, can just perhaps open up a doorway that leads down a new path for you, or remind you of some stuff you've forgotten about. And this can be in person or online. And again, I think it's a really nice process just to remind yourself what it's like being a student, and noticing what are the things that you really enjoy, what were the things you didn't enjoy, what things would you do differently, what little elements. And I'm not talking about going to someone else's class and just copying their entire lesson plan. It's getting the little inspiration, and there might just be one thing that they do that just gives you, it sparks the idea of like, oh, and then, well, I could do this way, and then that could lead into that, and oh yeah, that's a different way of doing. You might apply their style a little bit to what you do. There might be a particular practice that you want to redo in your own way. And that's certainly what I encourage people on my training to do. Like, I demonstrate loads and loads in the training, but I want teachers to then practice that, absorb it themselves, and then teach it in their own way, so it's authentic to them. So this isn't about copying people, but absolutely, you know, we need inspiration. And equally, other teachers might come to our classes for the same reasons, and going to each other's classes is a nice way also to network with other teachers, build a bit of a peer group, and to support other people's businesses. So you could do that in person or online. So going to other classes is the first thing that can be really helpful. The other thing, which is also going to other classes, but to things that are not yoga practices. And I think, again, we can get caught very much in our yoga way of thinking about the body and presence and movement and alignment cues and what's important. And I find going to other kind of activities can just help you connect with your body in a different way. Again, we can learn different things about health and well-being and fitness and bodies. You know, maybe by going to a dance class, or, you know, some kind of aerobics class, or to Pilates, or doing a sporting activity. Or it might be that you do some martial arts, or you might do a different kind of mindfulness meditation type of class. Again, there's a lot of different schools there. You know, I know some people regularly go to Buddhist meditation classes, have a slightly different practice to what we might be doing in our yoga classes. There's all kinds of, you know, so for me, I like 5 rhythms, which is, it's not really a dance class, but it's an open space where we have free conscious movement with different rhythms. So it's being in your body in a new way and getting new experiences, and often the physicality of it does something for us, but also just being in a different space, moving in a different way, can perhaps make you think about how we're teaching our yoga as well. And there may be elements of that that you want to then incorporate in. Or it may simply be by having these experiences, and the way that you connect with your body is different, that might start to inform your teaching cues a bit more, or the, you know, the stories that you might tell in your class, or the reference points, or, you know, it's not necessarily meaning that you teach completely different postures and practices, but often it's the way that we teach them, and the reference points, and the cues that we give, that can help people connect with their bodies in a different way as well. And there's something about going to something new, which puts us back in that beginner's mind as well. And again, it reminds us what it's like to not even know the basics. You know, if I was to turn up at a taekwondo class tomorrow, I don't know how you're supposed to stand, what their breathing's like. I don't know the names of anything. I've never done it. And so often we can forget those things as a teacher. And even if you haven't been teaching long, you've probably been practicing yoga for long. And sometimes we forget how important those foundational things are, and returning to the basics and what it's like to be a beginner. And there's also that process of, if we then put ourselves in a beginner, we trigger something in our own mentality, our own nervous system of, oh, this is new. You know, we have a different level of consciousness. And again, that can, all learning can spark off in all kinds of directions in our lives. So that can also be quite an inspiration for our teaching. Um, and then it may also be really useful and again fascinating to learn about other areas or other approaches around well-being, health, lifestyle, that again have overlaps. So there can be things like, I remember in London a few years ago, there was the Body Worlds exhibition, which was, this guy had kind of, people had donated their bodies, but they'd kind of freeze dried human bodies and exposed different areas. And it was so different from any anatomy book that you've ever seen, as these 3D things that you could walk around and see the human body in a completely different way. And of course, that wasn't anything to do with yoga per se, but you know, there could be things about learning about anatomy through, you know, via non-yoga people that could help you see and connect with the body in a different way. There could be things around learning a bit about Ayurveda, for example, or other complementary therapies, looking at different well-being systems. Some people I know are very into Chinese medicine, and it's not necessarily learning herbs and acupuncture, but there's the whole philosophy that goes with it in terms of your energy flow at different times of day, and the elements and food and seasons, you know, and things like this can be woven into our yoga classes, and not in a way of ever giving advice we're not qualified for, but it's just offering a new perspective or a new way of thinking about things, you know, and perhaps then you could, you know, weave that in as a theme for your class, or encourage your students maybe for their sort of homework between classes to focus on a particular thing, and notice how that makes them feel during their week. So there's lots of things around there. And, you know, there's lots of interesting books as well around, you know, and there's a lot being spoken about trauma and the nervous system. So The Body Knows the Score is a very famous book, you know, so it could be reading things like that. It's not a yoga book, but getting a deeper understanding of, for example, how trauma may play out in the body, ways of managing that. It can start to maybe inform the way that we teach, maybe taking a slightly different approach, maybe having different practical things in how we manage our classes. And it might then inspire a certain way of sequencing, if you're having that in mind, or certain breathing practices, or how you open or close a class. So things like that can be really interesting. And again, it might just re-spark your own fascination and passion, and think, oh, because I have this all the time when I'm, you know, either watching YouTube videos or reading things, and it's not a yoga thing, But then as I'm getting into that, it's sparking ideas of going, oh my God, this is like a big overlap. You know, in yoga, we would call it this. Or there's a penny drop moment. And then you think, oh, this issue that they're talking about, I know what there is in yoga that could address that. That could then be, you know, the starting point for a lesson plan. So reading around yoga and not just being in our yoga books can be really good. And there's nothing wrong with the yoga books, but I know sometimes for me, when I want to sort of to learn or to read and I'm looking for inspiration, sometimes going back to the area that you might feel a bit stuck in isn't necessarily going to spark the same thing, or it might just feel a bit too much like work when what you're needing is a break from work to revive yourself and get inspiration elsewhere. So looking around that can be really useful. And then we can start to think about the things that are a little bit more fun. So for me, when we think about yoga, and obviously I've spoken a lot about sort of body-based things, and in the West, our practice generally is a very physical practice, then but remembering that it is a whole philosophy, a whole lifestyle, and it's a way of being, it's a way of finding meaning in life, it's perhaps providing a framework of self-care. So yoga is a lot of different things, and as teachers we can focus on different elements of that. So I also think it's really valuable to look at other things that provide some philosophical input in life that connect you with yourself, connect you with nature, that give you inspiration, that make you feel glad to be alive, you know, and then we can take that into our classes. So some things for me that I find really helpful. I'm very lucky living in London, so I have a lot of cultural stuff around me. But things like going to art galleries, I mean, that doesn't automatically feel like you're doing some research for lesson plans, and it shouldn't feel like that, because then it just becomes a bit too a bit too serious and work focused. But being in places where, you know, or connecting with other people's artwork where they have obviously connected into something and have had this expression into these amazing paintings. I like reading poetry, going to live music, being in nature, and hopefully having time to be in nature and just stare a little bit and really notice the small details. Cooking as well can be a really inspirational place to be. And then some of your own practices, like, you know, drawing or sort of doing things that are a bit creative, looking at some hobbies that you have. You know, maybe you're in a sports team, maybe you're in a choir, maybe you like mountaineering. You know, and the other thing I've written down here also is not just observing nature in terms of plants, but just observing animals. And that was, I think, very often the inspiration behind some of the original yoga practices, is why they're named after animals. So just having some time just to sit and stare and look at nature, you know, absorbing, you know, cultural influences, if they are things that light you up. So, and it's those things where we're trying to connect with meaning in our lives, connecting in with ourselves, and these things can be transformative within us. And then we can take that transformation into the class. You know, and again, it might be that you sit and stare at a painting for a while and there is something in there that sparks an idea or a thought or reflection on life. And then that can be a teaching point in your class. So it may be that the physical practices aren't hugely different, but the insight that you might get from an aha moment in an art gallery is going to be like the really powerful thing that you then give to your students as this little, you know, thought for the day, as it were, some inspiration or insight that you've gotten from something that's completely outside of textbooks. And so, yeah, I'm just keeping aware of the time. So to finish for today, and this might be something that you want to do in your own time at another time, is just to take a moment or several, depending how much time you have available, to really tune into those things that potentially could be sources of inspiration. And it's a similar thing that I do on the course in terms of helping people to create their own self-care plan. But if we're focusing today on, you know, the inspiration for teaching, to feel like you have something to say, something to offer, to feel that renewed excitement about what yoga can do for ourselves and for others, we're going to just sit comfortably or kneel, however it is that you would normally be for a breathing practice or a meditation, and have a pen and paper handy. So just getting yourself nice and comfortable, letting the sit bones settle. So just feeling the weight of the lower body. So feeling that connection with the earth, with the ground. Either feel your sit bones on the ground or the soles of your feet. And you may even like to imagine roots coming into the ground. Just let the face soften, let the shoulders relax. And we're going to take one hand over the heart center, one hand over the belly, and feel your breath coming in and out of the body. So we're taking our awareness down to our heart center, to our womb space or our gut, for our instinct and intuition. Just keeping the breath smooth and steady. And closing the eyes if it's comfortable. And so we're just going to simply ask a few questions and write the answer completely unfiltered. So just let it come from a soulful or instinctive place rather than a mental place. So keeping your awareness in your heart center, in the womb space, in the belly. So tuning inwards. And asking yourself what activities or places make you feel the most alive and present, the most joyful. That loving the moment, glad to be alive. Yes. And so the next question is, again, what places or activities help you to feel most connected with yourself and connected with the earth? So feeling that inner connection and that groundedness. And the final question, again, what places or activities give you that sense of peacefulness and dreaminess, kind of carefree, kind of almost childlike, daydreamy happiness. So it's calm, peaceful. So just writing whatever comes to mind. And when you've finished writing, bring both hands back to the body. Take 3 deep breaths. And then gently lower the hands. Maybe stretch your fingers, curl your wrists. Maybe release the neck. Just whatever movement you need. And just coming back into your room, into your space. And hopefully you now have a few things on your notepad or just in your mind that could be areas that could really help you find that inspiration that you can bring into your classes. And there are also things that are just going to be nurturing for you anyway as part of your own self-care, personal development, and these things that nourish us make us better resourced to teach others, to hold space for others. And so if you're noticing out of those lists, those things that came straight from the heart, are they things that you are getting regularly? And if not, then maybe that's just a little indication of a tweak in your diary or your schedule to bring a few more of these things in, so you can have those things that feed your soul, that are nourishing, that help give you meaning in life, help you feel connected. And this in turn is going to help free that energy, that flow, that connectivity, come out of the head a little bit. And so we can teach really authentically from the heart, because it's what we're practicing, it's what we're experiencing, and it's not regurgitating something from a textbook, which may come out in a slightly different way. So hopefully that's given you some really lovely things to plan for the next month or so, and hopefully to plan in as a long-term thing. You know, maybe there's something that you do need to do like once a week. Maybe some of the things that came up were more big events, so you might want to plan one or two of them later in the year. But just noticing those things that are nourishing for you, that light you up and give you that, ooh, you can see in my body here, it's sort of that little lift. Those are the things that we need to have in our lives, and they are going to, in an indirect way, have a really great influence in our teaching. And these little insights and stories that we might get from these sorts of activities are going to be unique to you. And that's part of finding your voice as a teacher, that you're going to bring different things into a class than another teacher would, even if some of your asana sequences might be very similar. The way that you deliver it, the focal points, the little stories, the philosophical thoughts, all of those things are going to be uniquely you. So have fun. And I would love to hear in the comments below if there are any aha moments and what kind of activities came up for you. It'd be really lovely to share that. So yeah, do feel free to share. And I wish you a very enjoyable rest of your week. Take care.